Did the 80s really go down for BOC the way corporate media would have you believe? That is the idea of today's show. Yeah, Blue Oyster Cult. So, Blue Oyster Cult obviously is no stranger to time wormholes. I've done these two Imaginos related books, which I think are the coolest things I've ever done. Imaginos, of course, is a complete time traveler. He's popping in and out at certain places in world history all the time. You can go to martinpopoff.com and check out those books. I've got a couple other BOC books, one's out of print, but the other ones are available. But yeah, so the idea here is that BOC in the 80s kind of being affected by the spirit of Imaginos. Maybe this is Imaginos in the flesh, discombobulating their timeline. So here's the deal. History would have us believe that this album here, The Revolution by Night, came out November 8th, 1983. And then further on the idea of wormholes, we don't even know when this album came out. Especially, apparently in the UK, it came out in late 1985. And apparently in the US, it came out February 11th, 1986. So we don't even know when this came out. And then there is this bizarre and mysterious. We don't even know when this was made. This is made over a long period of time. The idea first started in 1982. But apparently, corporate media would have you believe that this album came out in July 1988. So I'm going to tell you the truth of when these records came out. Now, in reality, this is just a silly idea to tell you that the Blue Oyster Cult had a really bizarre time of it during the era of hair metal and thrash. That's really all we're trying to do here. So I've mentioned this in passing. We've had a Contrarians episode, I think, where we talked about Club Ninja, and I kind of brought this up there. My idea is that okay, so I would say that even though this is a 1983 album and this is a 85/86 album, my argument is that both of them sound like 1982 albums. So what's happening is we've got, I've done a History in 5 Songs with Martin Popoff audio podcast episode on how Canada invented hair metal. So a big bunch of that episode is about proto hair metal. So proto hair metal, what is it, right? Proto hair metal is Loverboy and Foreigner and Prism. Let's go down the Canadian route first of all. It's Prism, it's Trooper, it's April Wine, Triumph, Headpins, Toronto, Kickaxe, although they're coming out during hair metal. Coney Hatch, Santers, before hair metal, right? But also proto hair metal is maybe the third Gamma album. Definitely a big pile of the Sammy Hagar catalog, maybe Night Ranger, maybe Quarter Flash, maybe Pat Benatar. So there's this idea that in 81, 82, so hair metal starts more or less in 83, that there is this AOR rock is the other way we call it, radio rock, MOR. AOR even means a couple of different things. So the point is that, curiously speaking, so let's start with this one, I suppose. So this is a 1983 album. It's produced by Bruce Fairbairn. Sadly, we lost him at the age of 49. Canadian, cut his teeth on Prism and most notably Loverboy, a massive success. Loverboy is absolutely a card-carrying proto hair metal band. So they make this album, and it comes out in 1983. And it really sounds like a 1982 album. It is not anticipating any sort of. It hasn't learned anything from the rise of the new wave of British heavy metal and the increased fortunes in other old hard rock bands from the 70s, like Judas Priest, like Ozzy gone solo, like Black Sabbath, like Scorpions, and yeah, it's not picking up on this revolution, Van Halen into Quiet Riot, into Great White and Rat and stuff. Granted, that's a little later, and it's not really expected, right? But why is Blue Oyster Cult making a 1981, 1982 AOR MOR album for late 1983, November 1983? The plot thickens because I have said that Club Ninja sounds like the album that should have come out even before The Revolution by Night. So that's why I'm saying both of these albums in our alternate time theory wormhole came out in 1982. This came out in early 1982, and this came out in late 1982, because Club Ninja is even more AOR, MOR, Chicago, Kilroy is here, era sticks, Kansas Vinyl Confessions, Streets one, Steve Walsh tearing away from Kansas. I don't know who else. Donnie Iris, Tommy Two Tone, the Cars. But really, Sammy Hagar and Night Ranger, really. Bryan Adams. So it's not a hair metal album, yet it's coming out in, as the corporate media would have you believe, in late 1985, 1986, which is absolutely the height of the hair metal thing, right? So Rat is huge at this point. Cinderella's coming out. Guns N' Roses isn't here yet, but they're playing around town. And they don't make a hair metal album, nor do they make a thrash album. So Blue Oyster Cult is in this bizarre space, and I would say I could maybe even do a whole episode on this, but I would say there's a little bit of a parallel in our alternate time wormhole idea with Rush. Rush has a bit bizarre time of it during the heavy metal, hair metal, thrash metal 80s as well, right? But yeah, what they come out with, and this is produced by Sandy Pearlman, that in itself is a wormhole alternate time theory idea, because he's not producing anything like the traditional Sandy Pearlman at this point. So yeah, all throughout this album, there's kind of like these poppy songs. And again, they all feel like 1981, 1982 radio, quote unquote, hard rock, and not hair metal. There's really no hair metal on here. There's really no hair metal on here. And there's overblown drum sounds on the first one. We've got Rick Downey in there on drums, and he is I guess he was Albert's drum tech, right? So Albert's gone, and Bruce Fairburn is putting all these syndrums, all these electronic toms on it. So that's happening on there as well. So that's an early thing. So my point is that Blue Oyster Cult, I mean, they are in all sorts of discombobulation as a band. They're not doing well. They're breaking up. They're reforming. Who's in, who's out, kind of thing, all through this thing. So they're having their own wormhole problems, anyways. And what they do is they don't pick up on or reclaim the way someone like Alice Cooper would reclaim his hard rock, horror rock. He was even heavier, Alice Cooper, when he came back for like Raise Your Fist and Yell and Constrictor, right? He claimed something that he wasn't even all that heavy in the old days, right? But now he's like reclaiming whatever this space, right? So the point is he's smart enough to say, I invented this sort of thing. Blue Oyster Cult, when they get into The Revolution by Night, an 83 album released in 82, and Club Ninja, an 85 album released in 82, they aren't reclaiming the idea that they helped forge the way through hard rock. They aren't reclaiming the idea that these complicated hard rocky poppy bands somewhat, you could say, are creating a mystical alchemy that could result in hair metal, because Kiss does that, right? Kiss takes their 70s past and reforges it to become one of the premier hair metal bands all through the 80s. Very prolific, dressed completely hair metal, wrote completely hair metal. They got shredding guitarists, they got the poppy stuff, they got the outside songwriters. Kiss is absolutely one of the key hair metal bands of the 70s. But what does Blue Oyster Cult do? They go into an Imaginos discombobulated alternate timeline wormhole and make two 1982 albums, one in 1983 and 1986. Okay, that's the point I wanted to make about that. Now, in 1988, they put out this album, And I argue this is a 1991 album. I've called this, I called the subtitle of this episode file number BOC 828291. So there's why. So the point with this record is, again, 1988, still hair metal is flying high. Guns N' Roses is here. They're blowing up the charts, right? We're moving through the fame era of Poison and Cinderella. Warrants around the corner, and Badlands and Slaughters around the corner, Skid Row's around the corner, right? So it's a big time for hair metal at this point. We've all already got the mature periods of and the decline of Twisted Sister, Rat, Great White's still doing well. But also we have the rise of thrash. Everybody's excited about Slayer, Rain in Blood. Everybody's excited about Metallica, Master and Puppets moving into And Justice for All. Anthrax is doing well. Megadeth is now 2 or 3 albums in, right? So they're doing well. So Blue Oyster Cult, they don't do thrash. They don't do hair metal. What they kind of do with this record is this is the panicking because grunge is taking off record, as far as I'm concerned. So coming out in 1988 with this album makes no sense whatsoever. And we know, again, it is a wormhole situation, just like these 2 books and this album, which are all Imaginos kind of based, right? So we've got Albert and Sandy working on lyrical ideas and a concept that Sandy had in the late 60s, and it wormhole dropped down, parachuted down throughout all the albums, sprinkled like pixie dust through the 70s. Albert's estranged from the band, and he's working on this. He wants it to be a double album. He wants to put all the Imaginal songs in order. And you can go see Albert's recent albums where he's done that, right? He's done the whole Imaginals thing, more of a quiet acoustic version of it, right? So this album has a bizarre and long and protracted history of being put together, and lo and behold, it comes out in 1988. It's not a hair metal album. It's not a thrash album. And like I say, I argue that this is kind of like their Kiss Revenge, their Skid Row Slave to the Grind, their Warrant Dog Eat Dog, where hair metal is dying, and everybody's got to raise their game because this grunge thing is coming in, and get more serious and go back to their roots and make a heavy album and reclaim something they did in the old days. So I would argue that this album, as pastiched as it is, and with all sorts of guest performers and the production going up and down and having some really bad song choices and rehashing a bunch of things, I'm not a big fan of this album at all. But I would say thematically, musically, stylistically wise, this album is a bad attempt at reclaiming heavy Blue Oyster Cult from the 70s. So that's a reaction to grunge, panicking about grunge concept. So that's why this is bizarre, coming out in 1988. And my alternate time theory tells me it's coming out in late 1991 after Nirvana's Nevermind hits and grunge is already in a mature phase, with Green River and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains and Nirvana Bleach in 1989 and Mudhoney and all that kind of stuff, right? Melvins. So there you go. Again, this was just a bizarre way of trying to get the point across to you guys that Blue Oyster Cult completely pooched it in the 80s by not playing to any trends and not playing to any of their own strengths. I will add also, I think this is another intriguing way of looking at this. These 2 records here, it's almost like what they're trying to do is play to their pop songwriting strengths. They're more Buck Dharma oriented type writing. They're playing to their pop strengths from the 70s, which is some of their greatest material, but they're putting it through an ill-chosen 80s production lens. So you could draw somewhat. I mean, you could take you could take some of the songwriting on these albums and completely reperform them and do them with different producers and different production choices, and you would roughly wind up at songs that could have shown up on Mirrors or Spectres or something like that, right? So yeah, the point is that these two albums this album here, hang on, where are we here? This album here sounds dated for 1983. It's more of an 81, 82 album. This album sounds dated for 85, 86. It's also more of a 1981, 1982 album. And this album sounds early in 1988. This should have been a 1991 album. There you go. That is our alternate time theory concerning Blue Oyster Cult. Let me know what you think of this idea in the comments below. Check out martinpopoff.com for your bunch of book needs. Recently had a Guns N' Roses book come out, and this Iron Maiden book that's behind me here, biggest book I ever did, 666 pages. And like I say, yeah, these are the coolest thing I ever did. And I think you can just go to martinpopoff.com and see what the heck they're about, because they're explained in a lot of detail there. I did all the illustrations in them, all that as well. They're kind of like a timeline and quotes thing. And again, it is complete Imaginos, time hopping, history hopping, wormhole stuff. So that's why the parallel to this kind of makes sense, because here's Blue Oyster Cult completely screwing up in the 80s and not looking at market realities out there. Also, we've got a Patreon situation. We've got merch. If you join our Patreon, you can get on the panels that we do regularly as well. So we've got that. I've also got the audio podcast, Kicked in the Teeth, and AC/DC podcast, along with my history in 5 songs. There you go. Blue Oyster Cult, alternate timeline theory concerning Blue Oyster Cult. Go listen to some Legat White Flags.